In the high mountain valleys of 14th-century Switzerland, where snow falls thick and silence holds its breath, a humble shepherd named Jakob guards more than just his sheep. In a time when empires stretched their claws and noble banners cast shadows over the land, one quiet man stands against the tide, not with armies, but with knowledge of the mountains, the strength of his people, and a heart that will not bend to kings. This is not the tale of a warrior. It is the story of survival, resistance, and a land that remembers those who walk it with honor. Journey now into the frozen passes, where the wind whispers old truths and the shepherd waits, watchful, patient, unafraid. The morning snow had come in silence. Jakob could tell by the way it lay on the trees, thick and undisturbed, like flowers sifted from a great hand. The storm had passed in the night, leaving behind a clean white world, smoothed of every footprint, even the ibex trails gone from the ridgeline. He stirred the ashes of the hearth with a birch stick and added more pine to the fire. The cottage was narrow and low, built with his father's hands long before the Habsburg tacksmen ever dared cross into these hills. Smoke from his chimney curled upward like a black thread in the pale sky. Today was not a day for the lower paths. Jakob layered on his wool and strapped his snowshoes. The sheep had gone deeper into the folds of the valley, and he had to find them before the next storm came. 3 days away, if his bones were right. The wind had a softness to it, but no warmth. He stepped out into the cold. It met him like an old adversary. The forest was hushed beneath its weight of snow. Pine branches hung low, and the world was dim despite the daylight. Jakob moved with the skill of long practice, gliding over the surface, listening. Sheep weren't hard to follow, even in snow, if you knew their calls. But today, something else disturbed the quiet, a low murmur, like voices carried by the wind. Jakob paused near a tree whose trunk was split by lightning long ago. Voices. Human. He crouched, heart thudding. No one should be here this far up. And yet, he saw them, a trio of riders in mail, cresting the rise near the old Roman cairn. Not locals. Not pilgrims. These were armed men with purpose. Habsburgs. Jakob kept still until the riders passed. He waited longer, straining to hear any hint of return. These mountains had never belonged to kings. They were older than any crown, carved by glaciers and held together by silence and stone. But the Habsburgs wanted roads. They wanted tolls. They wanted taxes on salt and milk and breath. Jakob slipped down a game path invisible to all but him, heading toward his flock. The sheep had huddled in a low glen. He whistled low, and the dog, Lena, came running, tail high. Relief. But the sight of soldiers today meant something was coming. The others in the valley would need to know. He began the slow return, flock behind him, sky darkening. By dusk, Jakob saw the smoke, rising from the village near the water. Not chimney smoke. This was thicker, blacker, bitter with ruin. The Habsburgs had not passed through. They had descended. He reached the ridge above the village and knelt. Homes were burning. 3 of them. Jakob recognized one, his cousin Heinrich's. There was shouting, but not of resistance. No clash of weapons, only commands and weeping. A woman fled into the woods, dragging 2 children. Behind her, soldiers barked and beat a man already on his knees. Jacob's hands closed into fists. It had begun. Jakob waited until full dark. He did not descend into the village. Not yet. The soldiers might remain, drunk, suspicious, violent. It was their way. The Habsburg dukes claimed order, but their iron-clad fists knew nothing of the order in a valley like this, where the rhythm of life was quieter, older, shaped by the wind and snow, not by coin or decree. Instead, Jakob took the sheep to the upper fold, a half-collapsed stone pen shielded by thick evergreens and a frozen creek. He left them with Lena and set out alone down a side path, a trail known only to him and the foxes that used it in spring. The scent of smoke was stronger the closer he crept. Wood, wool, oil, the smell of ruin. From the edge of the trees, Jakob saw the remains of the village. He counted 5 homes burned. The tavern's roof had caved in. The church door hung broken, its bell silent. A few men with torches still wandered near the square, laughing. Soldiers. And there, barely visible in the dim orange glow, Heinrich's oxen cart overturned. A red cloth fluttered from it. Jacob clenched his jaw. He would not go down, but he would not forget. As the wind pulled the smoke toward the hills, Jacob placed his hand on a stone and made a vow. No words, just the silent oath of a man raised in the mountains. He would resist, quietly, with stone, snow, and time. At dawn, Jacob returned to the sheepfold, stiff with cold and fury. Lena greeted him with a soft whine. The sheep were unharmed, bedded in the shallow snow. But his mind was far from them. He needed to send word, north, across the ridge, to Bern. Not to the city elders, who wore fine cloaks and avoided conflict. No, he would send word to his mother's cousin in Frutigen, a man who once helped smuggle salt across the mountain without paying the duke's tax. A man who understood silence and danger. He carved the message into birch bark, not trusting parchment. Village burned. Habsburg soldiers present. Keep watch. J. He tied it inside the collar of his fastest sheepdog, Eska, and sent her north with a whisper. She vanished into the whiteness, a streak of fur on snow. Now Jacob waited. He waited in the shadow of ruined homes, in the cold breath of history pressing in again, as it always had. 3 days later, a stranger arrived. Jacob had seen the glint of steel in the midday sun, far off, and watched from a pine perch as the figure approached. Not a soldier, he moved like a hunter. Quiet, wary, wearing fur, not mail. Jacob descended and met him halfway. "You Jacob?" the man asked in a soft, clipped voice. Jacob nodded. The man dropped his pack and pulled free a linen roll. Inside, dried meat, salt, and a sealed flask of thick red wine. "From Frutigen," he said. "Otto sent me. Name's Casper." Jacob studied him. The man was older, lean, with a scar running down his jaw and eyes that had seen cities burn. But his hands were steady, his boots well worn, and he looked Jacob in the eye like a man used to truth. "There's more of us," Casper added. "Waiting, watching. You're not alone." And with that, something shifted in Jacob, just a fraction. The weight of solitude lifted for the first time in weeks. Winter deepened. The snow came harder, heavier. Ice built in the eaves of the cottage, and every breath inside steamed into the dark like ghost fire. Jacob and Casper dug trenches from the door to the barn, spent hours breaking the river ice for water, and took turns keeping the sheep warm. Then, one night, thunder. But no lightning. The sound came from the mountain itself. A deep, cracking roar. They knew what it meant. Avalanche. They burst from the cottage in time to see a wall of white sweep down the southern ridge, swallowing trees, rocks, and a distant torchlight. The Habsburg camp. Jacob stared in silence, breath clouding the air. "I didn't do that," he murmured. Casper just grinned. "But the mountain fights with us now." With the soldiers gone, some crushed by snow, others fled, Jacob and Casper moved quickly. They returned to the village ruins and searched the abandoned outpost. In the priest's house, half buried under snow and ash, they found letters. Orders sealed with the Habsburg crest. Jacob read slowly. Latin was never his strength, but some words stood out. Secure the valley. Eliminate resistance. Build road by spring. Send tax to Innsbruck. This wasn't punishment. It was conquest. Casper swore. They're planning more. This is just one valley. Jacob nodded grimly. Then we start with this one. By late winter, they weren't alone. Others had come. A baker whose shop had burned. A widow whose son had been taken for labor. A boy too young to hold a blade, but old enough to carry messages over snow. They became shadows, moving through pine and ice, sabotaging bridges, cutting sled ropes, herding wolves toward outposts at night. Never killing. Not yet, but always watching. The Habsburgs didn't know their names. They called them ghosts, demons of the mountain. Jacob called them family. They gathered once more beneath the council stone. The wind howled down from the pass, and snow swirled like breath from unseen lungs. Around a fire so small it barely smoked, the mountain's defenders sat cross-legged on pine boughs and broken stones. Jacob, Casper, old Marta from the lake hut, Jory the hunter, and 3 new faces from the lower cantons. Each brought news. The Habsburgs rebuild in Lucerne. Uri holds its pass. There's fighting near the Rus. Jacob listened, his face drawn, his fingers wrapped in goat-hide gloves. When the talking paused, he stood. They'll return, he said. We'll give them no trail. We'll leave no track. Let the snow speak louder than swords. Caspar nodded. They think the mountain is theirs. We'll remind them it's not. They drank salt broth from wooden cups and passed a pouch of tobacco around the circle. The pact was silent, but unshakable. This valley would not fall. In late February, the Habsburgs tried again. They sent engineers, men with shovels, hammers, and sacks of stone nails, to lay a road over the south ridge. It was meant to connect Lucerne to Innsbruck, carving through Jacob's homeland like a scar. Jacob didn't wait for orders. He and Caspar went at dusk, wearing white cloaks. They moved like the wind, leaving no print behind. That night, they burned the builder's timber. They unraveled the rope bridge the masons had strung. They painted crude symbols of wolves and skulls on tree trunks and left a cow's skull in the roadbed. Superstition did half their work. The builders fled. The road was never finished. She came with the thaw. A girl of maybe 16, in a red wool shawl and boots 2 sizes too large. Her name was Lise. She had walked 30 miles from a valley that no longer had a name. They burned it, she said. All of it. The church. The goats. My father. I don't know. Jacob took her in. Gave her a corner of the cottage. Taught her how to snare rabbits and patch clothes with deer sinew. Caspar showed her how to tie snowshoes and light a fire with flint. She barely spoke for the first month. Then one day, Jacob found her stringing pine cones with dry twine. A trap. Not for men, but for deer. She learns quick, Caspar murmured. She survived, Jacob said. Lee smiled for the first time that spring. The first Habsburg retaliation came in June. A fresh column of soldiers marched into the valley, armor shining, banners rippling with black and gold. They had a new leader now, Captain Wendelin, a man of cruel repute who believed terror made good soil for loyalty. He began with fire. 3 cottages, unguarded and old, were burned to ash. Then he sent word, surrender or suffer more. Jacob read the message at the council stone and tossed it into the flames. They think we're weak, he said. So let's show them the wolves have teeth, Caspar answered. That night, Jacob's group scattered the Habsburg grain stores with bare grease and broken flint. The rats finished what they started. Wendelin never got his bread. They planned the ambush for weeks. Jacob chose the place, Hollow Creek, where the trail narrows between 2 cliffs and the stream cuts a deep cleft under the snow. A false trail was laid, a goat carcass placed in view. Then they waited. The patrol came at dawn. 6 soldiers, laughing, careless. The first was felled by a falling branch, rigged with ropes. The second fell into the icy creek, his armor dragging him down. The rest turned to flee, straight into a cloud of crushed pine needles and snow ash, blinding them. When they awoke, they were bound, half buried in snow, with a note pinned to one's chest. This is not your land. Leave it. They were sent back to Lucerne barefoot. They never returned. By midsummer, Jacob's valley was free again. No Habsburg foot pressed the soil. No flag flew. No road reached their crests. The people, fewer now, but hardened, lived by their hands and their knowledge of snow and slope. Jacob sat by the river one warm night, watching fireflies drift like spirits above the reeds. Lee sat nearby, weaving bark thread. You think they're really gone? She asked. No, Jacob said. But we're still here. That was enough. In late summer, messengers came from the other cantons. Uri, Schwitz, Unterwalden. They had fought too, and won. Now they gathered, 30 men and women, at the Parliament of Hills, a stone hollow near the triple border, where every speaker stood in the same patch of light. Jacob spoke last. He told them of pine cones and wolves, of smoke and silence, of sheep dogs and avalanche and girls in red shawls. And when he finished, the oldest among them stood and declared, "Let this valley be part of the old Confederacy." It was not a crown, but it was freedom. Years passed. Jacob never finished the barn. He never married. But he taught. He taught children how to read bark maps, how to walk silently over stone, how to listen to the wind for signs of snow. Lise grew strong. She wore furs like armor and carried a bow Jacob carved for her himself. She married Jory, the hunter, and together they built a stone house facing the ridge. Caspar grew older, slower, but his eyes stayed sharp until the end. When he passed, they buried him under the council stone. No one ever built the road. And when Jacob grew too tired to walk the ridge, the valley walked it for him. Decades later, travelers would come through the Alps and ask about the old border, a valley with no tolls, no garrison, no tax. They'd be told a story of a shepherd, of snow and pine, of ghost fighters in white cloaks, of a man who spoke little but knew every stone. Jacob's cottage stood empty after he died, but his crook remained above the hearth. And on the council stone, someone carved, "Here lies Jacob, the shepherd who fed no king." Long after Jacob was gone, the winters kept coming. But so did the people. Children climbed the old trails. Women led flocks across the pass. Men carved arrows and sang rebel songs at fires. And high above them all, on the broken ridge where Jacob once stood, the wind still carried the scent of pine and promise. The Habsburgs never returned. Not because they were defeated once, but because the mountains had chosen their shepherds. And mountains do not forget.